1. Introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the eco-design wood stove, and international convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to residents against wood smoke emission particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates, or RAWSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this RAWSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, residents against wood smoke emission particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025 and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Episode 57 DHJ May 8, 2025 On Day Trump and Starmer are set to announce negotiation advances. In Episode 57 DHJ1 RAWSEP View 2 Headlines 3A Scientists hail this medical breakthrough. A political storm could cripple it. 3B for Embattled Starmer US-UK trade deal will count as a win. 3 EU unveils a plan to hit back at the US if trade negotiations fail. 3D Europe alone and in shock on VE Day. 3E a tricky challenge for the new government of Germany. A far-right opposition for a Trump tariffs to hit small farms in Maga heartlands. Hardest analysis predicts 4B coronavirus. Get rid of the pseudoscience. The plan to improve American health by a top doctor foreseen my rare disease was getting closer to a cure. RFK Junior could undermine that. 4D the Republican anti-tax coalition is beginning to disintegrate. 4E why is Trump considering raising taxes on millionaires? Now the anti-tax sacred cow might get killed. 4F Starmer and Trump to announce UK-US trade deal. Leaders to hold separate press conferences revealing first trade agreement by White House since global tariffs move. 4G UK officials land in Washington as talks over trade agreement continue. Senior negotiators hope to get agreement with US signed ahead of UK-EU summit to be held May 19, 2025. 4H how is Day commemorated across Europe? 4I France and Poland reconcile. It is a sign of the alarm in Europe over US disengagement. The Treaty of Nancy is a consequence of the aggression of Putin and the Trump global wrecking ball. Main content. 1 RAWSEP View the momentous news that on April 28, 2025 that Liberal Party Prime Minister incumbent Mark Carney won in Canada, and that on May 3, 2025 Labour Party Prime Minister incumbent Anthony Albanese won in Australia. Was that together these two successful re-elections of Liberal Democratic leadership in Canada and Australia were a massive voter rejection of Trump-style leadership. Trump Leadership 2.0 has shown Americans that Trump is intent on removing funding for the safety net of United States government programs that benefit the vast majority of poor and middle-income voters in order for Trump to fund tax breaks for the United States rich. These safety net programs extend from Social Security through funding for scientific and medical research that finds cures for diseases and vaccines for pandemics, through safety from air pollution that shortens or ends United States lives prematurely. May 8, 2025 is the 80th anniversary of V-Day. May 8, 1945 is the day World War II ended in Europe. On V-Day in 1945 the United States was a great ally of all freed European nations. In 2025 by the actions of Trump, Europeans see the United States allied with Russia, starting with the war in Ukraine and extending to hostility to Europe and most of the rest of the world in tariff wars. However, on May 8, 2025 Trump and Keir Starmer of the United Kingdom will announce some details of tariff negotiations in separate speeches in the United States. According to United Kingdom sources, the yield of these negotiations will be piecemeal changes to the original Trump tariffs. Other negative economic repercussions from Trump actions in the news today. The new Trump tariffs on motion pictures from foreign countries will apparently continue, and furthermore the actor who suggested them to Trump, John Voight, defends the tariffs in print. Trump tariffs may affect wedding costs. Trump tariffs are set to hit small American farmers the hardest. The attack on scientifically and medically beneficial mRNA vaccines, which have minimal side effects, led by Kennedy Jr. in service to Trump, and the negative repercussions of this Trump attack on science and effective medicine are explored in several articles today. On a day very important to the United Kingdom and Europe, France is allying with Poland in mutual defense because the United States under Trump is seen as abandoning the defense of Ukraine. The Treaty of Nancy is a consequence of the aggression of Putin and the Trump global wrecking ball in Germany. The Christian Democrat CDU Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who is head of a centrist coalition with the SPD and was only newly elected on May 6, 2025, has his greatest challenge on the right from the neo-Nazi Alternative for Germany IFT party. The CDU-SPD coalition may seek to contain IFT further by supporting a ban by German courts, even as IFT is now partially contained behind a firewall. Germany under Merz intends to build up its military strength in order to better defend Ukraine against Russian aggression. One conservative writer thinks that Republicans may spontaneously back down on demanding tax breaks for the rich because of massive protests against that in the United States recently. Another writer states that no one has ever defeated autocracy from the sidelines. United Supreme Court head Roberts stated that courts must check the excesses of Congress and the president. 2A headlines. The New York Times, May 8, 2025. World Bill Gates explains his plans to close the Gates Foundation in 2045. The New York Times. World opinion. Lessons from World War II to avoid World War III. The New York Times. Trump tariffs and entertainment tax. The New York Times. Trump tariffs. How the Trump tariffs might affect wedding costs. The New York Times. Trump tariffs. Late night anxiously awaits the unveiling of the Trump big news. The New York Times. Trump miscellaneous efforts grow to thwart mRNA therapies as RFK Junior pushes vaccine weariness. The New York Times. Trump miscellaneous opinion. No one has ever defeated autocracy from the sidelines. The New York Times. United States courts must check the excesses of Congress and the President. Roberts says. The New York Times. United States. How Democrats hope to overcome a daunting 2026 Senate map. The New York Times. United States opinion. Can Democrats win the working class and save the Republic? The New York Times. California LA officials test residents for lead after fires. The New York Times. New York cyber attack on United Health leaves medical providers in debt. The New York Times. United Kingdom. Agatha Christie, who died in 1976, will see you in class. The New York Times. United Kingdom. For embattled Starmer US-UK trade deal will count as a win. The New York Times. European Union EU unveils plan for retaliatory tariffs on US products if negotiations fail. The New York Times. Europe alone and in shock on VE Day. The New York Times. Germany. MERS and the German new government face a tricky challenge and led opposition. The New York Times. Russia review. Will the death of Rasputin have a cult following? The New York Times. Military show of strength by Russia masks economic and diplomatic cracks. The New York Times. 2B headlines. The Guardian, May 8, 2025. Trump tariffs. John Voight defends the Trump film tariff plan. Something has to be done. US News. The Guardian. Trump tariffs to hit small farms in Maga heartlands. Hardest analysis predicts Trump tariffs. The Guardian. Trump miscellaneous. Get rid of the pseudoscience. The plan of a top doctor to improve American health. Coronavirus. The Guardian. Trump miscellaneous. My rare disease was getting closer to a cure. RFK Junior could undermine that Jameson rich. The Guardian. Trump miscellaneous. The Republican anti-tax coalition is beginning to disintegrate. David Zerota, Arjun Singh, Ariella Markowitz and Natalie Bettendorf. The Guardian. Trump miscellaneous. Why is Trump considering raising taxes on millionaires? Alex Bronzini, vendor. The Guardian. United States. Amazon says it is a myth that robots kill jobs. Here is the reality. Benjamin E. Flung. The Guardian. New York watchdog warns Trump cuts will usher in open season for scammers. US politics. The Guardian. Canada. Seth Meyers on the Mark Carney White House visit. The most Canadian confrontation I have ever seen. Late night TV roundup. The Guardian. United Kingdom. Starmer and Trump to announce UK-US trade deal. Trade policy. The Guardian. United Kingdom. UK officials land in Washington as talks over trade agreement continue. International trade. The Guardian. Europe. They live. UK and Europe hold ceremonies to mark 80 years since end of Second World War in Europe. France and Poland reconcile. It is a sign of European alarm over US disengagement. Paul Taylor. The Guardian. 2C headlines. Other media. May 8, 2025. Trump miscellaneous. Kennedy Center boss calls out vapid and intolerant artists after Les Mis actors threaten to skip Trump performance. Canada Lip reader claims Trump gave controlling 8-word order to Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. RAWSEP View. According to the article, the US president then directed the Prime Minister just turn your face and wave over there. The PM obliged and the president expressed his gratitude. 3. The New York Times. 3A scientists hail this medical breakthrough. A political storm could cripple it. Therapies involving mRNA, a key to COVID vaccines, hold great potential in treating several diseases, but some lawmakers want to ban them and the government is cutting funding. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, May 8, 2025. To scientists who study it, mRNA is a miracle molecule that vaccines that harnessed it against COVID saved an estimated 20 million lives. A rapid development that was recognized with a Nobel Prize. Clinical trials show mRNA-based vaccines increasing survival in patients with pancreatic and other deadly cancers. Biotechnology companies are investing in the promise of mRNA therapies to treat and even cure a host of genetic and chronic diseases including type 1 diabetes and multiple sclerosis. But to some state legislators, mRNA therapies are weapons of mass destruction and public health threat. They argue that these vaccines are untested and unsafe and will be pumped into the food supply to mass medicate Americans against their will. Kennedy Jr., the top health official in the nation, has inaccurately called the mRNA shots against COVID the deadliest vaccine ever made. Short for messenger RNA. mRNA exists naturally in every cell of every living organism. Its discovery in 1961 was also celebrated with a Nobel Prize, but its association with COVID has thrust it to the center of a political storm buffeted by vaccine hesitancy and misinformation, anger over lockdowns and mandates, and the ascendance of the Make America Healthy Again movement in the Trump administration. States and federal health agencies are playing on public wariness about vaccines to cancel research into mRNA, more broadly indicating how much the lingering politicization of COVID is fueling the new attacks on science. While no vaccine is without side effects, including deadly ones, the mRNA vaccines often have fewer side effects than traditional vaccines that insert a small amount of live virus. mRNA is not some foreign substance, it is something that you are exposed to all the time, said the woman who was chief scientific officer at Moderna when it produced the COVID vaccines. Every time you are eating whole foods, meat or vegetables, you are consuming lots of mRNA and your body is breaking it down and creating its own, even if the bills do not pass. Their proponents say they are playing a long game. Last month, Republicans in Minnesota proposed a ban that would classify mRNA products as weapons of mass destruction, adding it to a list that includes smallpox, anthrax and mustard gas. The ban copied the language of a bill written by a Florida hypnotist, Joseph Sansone, who says he wants to try to get the ban passed in every state and in Congress. In his newsletter, Sansone praised local Republican organizations that have adopted resolutions in favor of the bans and encouraged his followers to start showing up at political events to challenge politicians. It is poking them in the eye, he wrote, which has an important psychological effect. 3B for Embattled. Starmer US-UK trade deal will count as a win. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has spent months nurturing his relationship with President Trump. Is that about to pay off? Edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. And relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, May 8, 2025. For Prime Minister Keir Starmer have written, the news of a trade agreement with the United States is a much-needed political victory as well as vindication of his strategy of assiduously cultivating Trump. The details of the agreement were not yet clear and could prove contentious with farmers and other interest groups in Britain. The Trump announcement on social media seemed to catch even senior British officials off guard after weeks of negotiations characterized by 2 steps forward, 1 step back progress, but that Britain is the first country in the world to conclude a deal with the United States after Trump imposed an across-the-board tariff of 10% on dozens of American trading partners seemed to affirm the special relationship often invoked by British and American diplomats. Starmer was expected to address the deal later on Thursday. Much of his day will be given over to commemorating the 80th anniversary of the Allied victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. That history provides a fitting backdrop for a trade agreement that Britain will no doubt present as a symbol of its enduring ties to the United States. E U unveils a plan to hit back at the US if trade negotiations fail. Boeing and big American food producers could end up in the crosshairs if the bloc follows through on its threat to impose new tariffs on more American goods. Edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, May 8, 2025. The European Union on Thursday announced a plan to ramp up the pressure on the United States in hopes of prodding the Trump administration toward serious trade negotiations. The European Commission, the executive arm of the European Union, announced 2 major steps that it could take to head back. Officials laid out €95 billion or $107 billion worth of goods that they could target with higher tariffs in retaliation to the duties that the United States has announced or imposed. They also said that the bloc would start a World Trade Organization dispute against the United States on both across-the-board tariffs and on duties on cars and car parts. Neither measure will take effect immediately. Instead, European governments will spend the next month consulting on a list of American products that it could hit with higher tariffs. The proposed list includes some agricultural products such as soybeans, meats and bourbon, along with manufactured goods that include sewing machines, airplane parts and car parts. It could also curb European exports of key chemicals used in food processing along with scrap metal. The European Union did not announce what the tariff freights on those products would be, but if it follows through on its threat, Boeing could be among the companies hit. A senior European official acknowledged American food companies could also be affected. The goal is to have the legal plans ready in case negotiations with the US do not produce a satisfactory result, the statement said. 3D Euro Poland in shock on VE Day. On the 80th anniversary of Nazi the German defeat, echoes of tyranny's past shake a continent that is trying to find its footing in the face of the Trump hostility. Subsetted by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 non-profit organization. The New York Times, May 8, 2025. It is disquieting to recall the moving ceremony on the beaches of Normandy that marked the 80th anniversary of D-Day 11 months ago, a celebration of the ironclad alliance between the United States and Europe and their shared resolve to meet the test of ages and defend Ukraine. At the conclusion of Vichy France's magisterial book that brought France to a deeper understanding of its darkest hour, Robert Paxton, the American historian, writes, the deeds of occupier and occupied alike suggest that there come cruel times when, to save the deepest values of a nation, one must disobey the state. France after 1940 was one of those times. Those words seem worthy of particular reflection today, 8 decades after peace returned with decisive American help to a shattered European continent. 3. A tricky challenge for the new government of Germany. A far-right opposition Chancellor Friedrich Merz coalition is weighing how to confront the Alternative for Germany party, which has been rising in the polls. Subsetted by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 non-profit organization. The New York Times, May 8, 2025. Ever since the German Parliament building reopened in Berlin in 1999, its second largest meeting room has been occupied by what had often been the German second largest party, the Social Democrats SDP. Now, following their disastrous performance in the February federal elections, the Social Democrats may lose the room to the far-right Alternative for Germany, or AfD, which came in second and insists that by the rules of the parliament it should get the room instead. The fight over the Wells Hall is just one in a series of challenges facing the Social Democrats and their senior partners in the incoming governing coalition, the center-right Christian Democrats, as they prepare to confront the AfD. Most important, they are considering how to deal with a party that is both politically toxic and yet powerful enough to undermine the Merz coalition agenda. Heightening the tensions was a decision on Friday by the German Domestic Intelligence Service declaring the AfD an extremist organization. On Thursday, the service said that it would refrain from describing the party as extremist pending a decision in a lawsuit filed by the AfD on Monday, though it did not rescind its decision. For The Guardian. 4. Trump tariffs to hit small farms in Maga heartlands. Hardest analysis predicts major corporations are best placed to benefit from Trump policies at the expense of independent farmers. Subsetted by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 non-profit organization. The Guardian, May 8, 2025. The winners and losers of the Trump first tariff war strongly suggests that bankruptcies and farm consolidation could surge during his second term, with major corporations best placed to benefit from his policies at the expense of independent farmers. New analysis by the nonprofit research advocacy group Food and Water Watch. The Trump first-term tariffs were particularly devastating for farmers in the Maga rural heartlands. Farm bankruptcies surged by 24% from 2018 to 2019, the highest number in almost a decade, as retaliatory tariffs cost U.S. farmers a staggering $27 billion. 4b Coronavirus. Get rid of the pseudoscience. The plan to improve American health by a top doctor. Eric Topol says we can prevent age-related disease and live fuller lives, but only if we reject anti-science malarkey. Subsetted by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 non-profit organization. The Guardian, May 8, 2025. A new book by Dr. Eric Topol examines the best evidence-based approaches to longevity and seeks to challenge the malarkey of the biohacking, age reversal and anti-science movements, all of which have found new purchase in American society amid scientific distrust stoked during the COVID pandemic. Topol is the director and founder of the Scripps Research Translational Institute and a practicing cardiologist. The new book by Topol, released on Tuesday, is called Superagers: An Evidence-Based Approach to Longevity. Right now it is such dark times in the medical research, says Topol, and he argues that we're at A moment to prevent the big three diseases: cancer, heart disease and neurodegenerative disease. This amid the convergence of knowledge about healthy behaviors newly available and forthcoming biometric data and the computing power of artificial intelligence. Foreseeing ear disease was getting closer to a cure. RFK Junior could undermine that. The Trump funding cuts to the NIH could destroy a wave of approaching research breakthroughs. Accepted by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, May 6, 2025. Since Kennedy Jr. assumed control of the U.S. Health Department in February with a mandate to lower chronic disease rates and in childhood chronic disease, he has moved quickly to remake the U.S. federal health infrastructure, but the Trump actions on medical research are already threatening that goal and could end medical progress in this country for good. The Kennedy office oversees the National Institutes of Health, the control center of disease research in the United States. The Kennedy agency has killed almost 800 active projects according to Nature affecting medical research into HIV, AIDS, diabetes, health of women, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's and more. The administration wants to cut the NIH budget up to 40% while consolidating its 27 agencies separated by disease area into just 8. At 3 days old, I was diagnosed with a rare version of the most common type of birth defect, congenital heart disease. My survival past infancy was an accident of history, the product of being born at the right moment in the lifespan of medical research. Do not worry, my first surgeon told my parents when I was a child, he is going to long outlive you both, but my future and the future of others like me is not guaranteed. As I grew up, my doctors acknowledged that the surgery was merely palliative, not curative, a stopgap medicine way of buying me some time. With medicine advancing so quickly, though, we could hope that new solutions would be brought into existence by the time I needed them. In the decades since, we have come to understand the long-term consequences of surgery, likely progressive damage across organ systems leading to the need for heart or multi-organ transplants in most patients. By the age of 40 last year, shortly after turning 31, I was formally diagnosed with cardiac cirrhosis and informed that I will need a combined heart-liver transplant within the decade. The time that those early developments brought me seems to be running out. Private foundations have also begun correcting an imbalance in funding. Historically, pediatric cancer has received 5 times the amount of funding that CHD does, despite similar prevalence and mortality rates. Ongoing research has indicated that targeted mRNA vaccines may show promise in preventing or treating AIDS and certain types of cancers. The technology is also being studied for its ability to treat cystic fibrosis, heart failure, sickle cell anemia and other genetic birth defects, but scientists working in these areas through the NIH have already been instructed to strike mention of mRNA vaccines from grant applications and materials, perhaps owing to the Kennedy hostility towards vaccines and his repeated lies about mRNA technology. If the proposed funding cuts and changes at the NIH are allowed to proceed, the Kennedy mandate to lower chronic disease rates will fail, and his failure will be obvious. We will see it in rising rates of cancer, birth defects, diabetes and other chronic illnesses. We will see it in the exodus of medical experts to other countries and the collapse of the researcher pipeline in U.S. universities. We will see the quality of our supposed world-class medical system crash as treatments stagnate. We will pay for this cruelty in blood and lives and lost generations. In truth, the congenital heart research of today has arrived too late to save my own life. My future is at the whim of our broken transplant system itself, already showing signs of strain under Kennedy, but I continue championing the work being done because of the hope that future children will not be consigned to the same fate. The only thing that will have made the suffering I have faced worth it is if I am a part of the last generation to do so. 4D The Republican anti-tax coalition is beginning to disintegrate. For half a century the GOP has embraced tax cuts for the rich, but as Americans turn against the idea, the party is divided. Edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 non-profit organization. The Guardian, April 24, 2025. Tax cuts for the rich have been the glue holding the U.S. conservative movement together. Now the epoxy seems to be less sticky. In recent weeks, polls have shown Republican voters becoming far more skeptical of across-the-board tax reduction proposals, reflecting that shift. GOP lawmakers are now trial ballooning a proposal to increase some taxes on the wealthy. Some Maga voices are attempting to articulate a Republican-leaning tax cut version of the Democrat traditional redistributionist rhetoric, arguing that higher taxes on millionaires should finance bigger tax cuts for the working class. Republican leaders are responding with the previously unthinkable proposals to raise some taxes on the rich. All of this has the swamp of Washington old guard Republicans in a panic. One longtime anti-tax leader insisted that there are traitors inside the Trump White House, and another declared this is a potential crisis in the party. It sounds like Bernie Sanders' economics in the mid-1970s. The Republican Party was adrift, demoralized and divided amid both the post-Watergate backlash and the attempt by Gerald Ford to raise taxes in pursuit of halting inflation and plugging federal budget holes. Republicans had continued to play Scrooge carping against increased spending without ever offering the obvious alternative of tax reduction. One conservative writer concluded Republicans, traditionally the party of income growth, should be the Santa Claus of tax reduction, offering it as a supposed gift to Americans, and understand that the first rule of successful politics is never shoot Santa Claus. It was a revelation for a new generation of conservatives seeking to create a sunnier, more optimistic image for the GOP. In the wake of the cranky campaign of Barry Goldwater and the downfall of Richard Nixon, younger, more telegenic Republican leaders such as Representative Jack Kemp passed the essay around to colleagues, urging them to reimagine tax cuts not solely as a means to demonize government but also as a way to court the working class with promises of life-bettering benefits. The dual message of so-called supply-side economics soon found its Santa Claus in the anti-tax governor turned anti-tax President Ronald Reagan. Ramming more tax cuts for the rich through Congress is the surest way for Trump to enrich himself, his family, and the entire front row of his inauguration. The powerful anti-tax movement of those years convinced Reagan and Bush to plow forward. Reagan followed up his first tax cut by further reducing the top tax rate, and the Bush sequel to his first tax cut was slashing taxes on corporate dividends. Trump could end up doing much the same, but this time around a long-term politics of taxes are in flux. Running the same tax play would show a Republican president siding with oligarchs against the preferences of his own party, rank and file, that no longer buys the Santa Claus theory. That is a new and unpredictable dynamic, one that may finally begin weakening the anti-tax grip on power in the years ahead. 4. Why is Trump considering raising taxes on millionaires? Now the anti-tax sacred cow might get killed. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, May 8, 2025. I actually love the concept. Trump recently told Time magazine of a proposal circulating within his cabinet to raise taxes upon those earning over $1 million. If the Republican fiscal bargain is breaking apart, the GOP will need another way to unify its increasingly disparate base rather than take on the deeper structural questions of economic inequality. Democrats focus their campaigns on defending existing programs like Social Security and Medicare. Perhaps the crack-up of the tax-cutting coalition will lead the Republican Party to attempt that compromise, just as the Democrats sidestepped thorny economic issues by rallying around the defense of widely accepted civil rights. The GOP could turn away from its long-standing economic bargain, the one that has defined its politics since Reagan, and instead double down on its campaign to undermine those same rights. What is certain, however, is that the tax-cutting coalition as we know it has become deeply unsustainable. Tax-cutting once unified the Republicans, but in forcing Trump to choose between taxing the top or deeper austerity for the bottom, it now threatens to blow it apart. 4. Starmer and Trump to announce UK-US trade deal. Leaders to hold separate press conferences revealing first trade agreement by White House since global tariffs move. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, May 8, 2025. The UK and US are poised to announce a trade agreement, the first by the White House since Trump announced his sweeping global tariffs. Trump said it was a very big and exciting day for both countries before a press conference in the Oval Office on Thursday. Keir Starmer is planning to deliver his own press conference at around the same time. The leaders are expected to unveil a trade deal focused on lowering U.S. tariffs on specific products such as British steel, aluminium and cars. The deal is not expected to be comprehensive. UK officials said it would set out agreement on specific sectors where Trump has imposed tariffs and was a starting point from which the two sides would keep negotiating. 4. UK officials land in Washington as talks over trade agreement continue. Senior negotiators hope to get agreement with US signed ahead of UK-EU summit to be held May 19, 2025. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, May 7, 2025. A team of senior British trade negotiators has landed in Washington as talks over a deal between the two countries hastens. Downing Street did not deny reports the deal could be signed as early as this week, although government sources said the recent announcement by Trump of film industry tariffs had proved a significant setback. One person briefed on the talks said, "We have a senior team on the ground now and it may be that they are able to agree something this week." The Trump threat of 100% tariffs on films produced in foreign lands, which could have a major impact on the British film industry, had gone down very badly in Downing Street, UK. Officials say they are targeting tariff relief on a narrow range of sectors in order to get a deal agreed before they begin formal negotiations with the EU over a separate European agreement. A draft deal handed to the US a week ago would have reduced tariffs on British exports of steel, aluminium and cars in return for a lower rate of the digital services tax, which is paid by a handful of large US technology companies. Trump made negotiating a trade deal with the UK a lower order priority behind a series of Asian countries. UK officials said they have been able to continue talks with their US counterparts despite that, describing the Trump approach as chaotic. Officials from the Trade Department arrived in Washington this week hoping to reach an agreement on two outstanding issues: pharmaceuticals and films. Trump has said he will impose tariffs on both industries, mainstays of the British economy, but has not yet given details for how is V Day commemorated across Europe. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, May 8, 2025. For Western Europe, including the UK, V Day largely heralded the return of liberty and the triumph of democracy and marked the end of Nazi aggression and occupation, the slaughter of a generation of young men and the horrors of the Holocaust. Belgium combines its ceremonies with Armistice Day on 11th of November, which marks the end of the First World War. The Netherlands and Denmark celebrate Liberation Day on May 5th. Italy, one of the German wartime allies, also marks Liberation Day. Victory over the Mussolini puppet government. But on April 25th, Russia itself commemorates V Day with a huge military parade on May 9th, because when the ceasefire that ended the war came into force at 11:01 p.m. in Berlin on May 8, 1945, it was already the following day in Moscow. The Kremlin has said the Slovakian Moscow-friendly Prime Minister Robert Fico and Alexander Vučić, the Serbian ultranationalist president, will attend the Russian military parade despite strong EU criticism. A counter-parade attended by EU foreign ministers will be held in Lviv, Ukraine. A group of young people attending the V Day service at Westminster Abbey said they were there to challenge stereotypes about their generation in the UK. A 19-year-old, a 21-year-old and a 24-year-old from youth collaborators are working on a report to influence government strategy on young people. "We think it is really important for young people to be invited to this today. We are very interested in V Day. We think it is really important and it is a privilege to be here for my friends in Poland. Reconcile. It is a sign of the alarm in Europe over US disengagement. A new pact could be the first step towards extending the French nuclear shield over Central Europe." Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, May 8, 2025. In the city where a dethroned Polish king once governed a French province and built enduring landmarks, the leaders of France and Poland will sign a treaty on Friday that could be the first formal step towards extending French nuclear deterrence over Central Europe in this new era of US unreliability. The Treaty of Nancy will be signed on Europe Day in the town hall on the 18th century place Stanislas by the French President Emmanuel Macron and the Polish Prime Minister Tusk. It will cement a reconciliation between two countries that have been estranged within the EU for most of the last 30 years. The French lack of enthusiasm for EU enlargement and its pursuit of cooperation with Russia were the main reasons for the strained relationship. Warsaw has long relied exclusively on the US and NATO for its security and has resisted an EU role in defense, but with Trump pursuing rapprochement with Russia, the arch-foe of Poland, and his willingness to let Moscow prevail in Ukraine and reduce US military exposure to Europe, Tusk is rushing to build closer ties with Paris, Berlin and London in a quest for extra security reassurance the Franco-Polish Friendship Treaty, closely resembling the Franco-German treaty signed in 2019, will be inked on the very day that Vladimir Putin stages a giant military parade in the Red Square in Moscow, with the Chinese President Xi Jinping at his side to mark the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany. The conservative nationalist Law and Justice Peace Party, the last Polish government led by Jarosław Kaczynski, did its best to obstruct French efforts for closer EU integration, but Poland has now repositioned itself at the heart of the EU under the center-right coalition of Tusk, and France has lost its illusions about Russia since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Putin. The Treaty of Nancy is a consequence of the aggression of Putin and the Trump global wrecking ball.
Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Hi, I am Leone. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your neighborhood epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times. 1 Introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning, replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.